Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Superman Unlimited issue 14, written by Dan Slott, with art by Lucas Mayer and David Messina, colors by Giuliano Paratelli, and letters by Dave Sharp. The Super Son's true nature is revealed this issue, as in Metropolis, it's another day that ends in Y, which means a crazed scientist is on the rampage. This time it's Professor Thaddeus Kilgrave, who has stolen a top secret project from Star Labs. His rampage doesn't last long as Superboy and Tomorrow Man arrive to take him down. Tomorrow Man lets Superboy go at the villain alone, telling him that he's doing great, but to be careful not to damage the device that Kilgrave took, since they don't know what it is. We get a really nice bit of world building here, as the people watching the fight use an app called the Shaz app, kind of like the Shazam app in real life, to identify the heroes they are watching. Finding Superboy is now back after being missing for so long, but they cannot identify Tomorrow Man thanks to his mask. That's a cool little thing to have in the world, a Shazam-like app people can use to figure out which heroes are which villains are which, because I imagine it would get confusing if like the countless that keep like showing up, some new guy like Tomorrow Man keeps showing up and they don't know who it is and they just want to make sure he's a good guy or a bad guy. John also mentoring his younger self is great. It's a good role for him, and I think he's finally found that little niche that would be a good fit for him, and it kind of fits in nicely with the Superman family, hierarchy, or like the roles they all have, because right now none of them are a mentor figure to other characters. Supergirl's off doing her own thing, and I guess you could say she's kind of doing a mentor thing, but not really. She's trying to save Kandor. Superboy is there as well and not doing, his own thing with Lena, his, kind of half sister. So to have John kind of do this role as like a mentor role, something that, Superman would do is great. I really love that. It allows him to do a very Superman-like role, fulfill his role as a Superman on this earth, while also being his own thing, being Tomorrow Man. So it's a good middle ground where he still is doing, the Superman family stuff, but on his own terms. Superboy ends up getting a little carried away with the heat vision, melting Kilgrave's robot to slag. Tomorrow Man warns him that Kilgrave is just an average guy, someone they could easily hurt if they aren't careful. The villain takes offense to being called average, as Superboy apologizes since he didn't know Kilgrave's story. Tomorrow Man finds that a little bit suspicious, since when he was John's age, or when he was John, he studied everyone their father fought and knew who Kilgrave was in and out. Superboy doesn't remember any of that, and Tomorrow Man puts it from his mind, figuring John has just got a lot on his plate, and he and Lois believe that John will get the swing of things over time. John asks about his mother, wondering why she isn't there helping them out, and Tomorrow Man again becomes suspicious, since Lois Lane doesn't have powers. She has her own power, and that is chasing down a story. Okay, so if it wasn't really obvious already since what we saw in the last issue and then what we're seeing here, this is not John Kent of the Prime Earth. This is an Earth 3 variant, one whose mother was Superwoman, was Lois Lane, who had powers. This is ULTRABOY, if you will. This is also something that was set up over in Mark Waid's World's Finest series when the heroes went to Earth 3 and we learned that Superwoman was pregnant with Ultraman's child. I love that Slott got to play with that and actually use that here. And I imagine that there was, talks about setting that up in that other book as like a very small thing that you could throw back to. But I like that. I like that there's actually some thought going into this. It isn't just being dropped on us here and we have to sort of put together the pieces ourselves. It also highlights the fact that they aren't bringing back a de-aged John as much as people seem to think they are. No matter how many people seem to think that that's not what's happening here. This is not the de-aged John. This is an evil variant. As the heroes continue their patrol, Lois stops by the Kent farm, wanting to talk with Ma and Pa about her son, since she doesn't know where John is. Pa isn't too worried, since if he's not off with the Titans, he's probably down visiting Kara in Midvale. Lois lets slip that she isn't so sure this time, since there's a chance that John has come back as his younger self. The Kents think that there's a few Superboys running around now, what with John and now Superboy and Superboy Prime, all stopping by recently, almost like it's a reign of Superboys. Lois knows that something is off about the return of Superboy, but Martha asks her what her heart is telling her. Lois, however, doesn't want to think with her heart, since she's a journalist. She knows to follow the story wherever it takes her. I'm really hoping Lois's story gets a little bit more page time like it is here. Of course, she would immediately figure out that something is wrong with this younger Superboy. Something's not clicking, and nothing is ever simple with time travel or other universes getting involved. And I like she's picking up on that and knows that there's a story there. I also like that because she's focusing on that story, she doesn't seem to realize that Tomorrow Man is John, is the present day John. And I kind of like that. I kind of like she's blinded by who this little kid is because she so desperately wants that back that she can't see what's right in front of her. And I'm sure that's going to come up in the story as well. Jonathan reminds Lois that while he's a man of faith, he has seen a lot in the world that has shaken it, and it's made him believe all things are possible. Martha agrees, thinking that Lois just needs to stop hiding behind her press badge and tell her what her heart says. Lois relents and tells Martha that she just wants her son to be back. Martha is glad that she's gotten that out of her system, telling Lois now to get to work and get to the bottom of her story. Back in Metropolis, Volcana is causing all sorts of trouble at a bank, having robbed it of its money. Superboy and Tomorrow Man's confrontation is covered by the Newsboy Legion as Volcana turns the entire street to liquid magma. Seeing the fire and lava is triggering not just for Tomorrow Man, but for John, who begins remembering what Ultraman did to him, and to him, that was just yesterday. Tomorrow Man wants to wrap this up fast because of it, using a trick that he learned from the Flash as he super speeds across the magma, splashing it over Volcana, then freezing it with his freeze breath. I really like the little detail here was to use the freeze breath, he has to lift the mask he's wearing, and he can't do it through the mask, which makes it a lot less practical than you think if you got to keep lifting the mask to use one of your powers. The magma instantly hardens on Volcana's skin and locks her into place, stopping her rampage. The problems don't stop there though, as Superboy is still locked up in his memory of Ultraman torturing him, with the villain telling the boy to show him if he has what it takes to survive. Once the other shoe drops and this is all revealed, I'm sure we're going to get a replay of these flashbacks where it's revealed that the John we see in these flashbacks actually is Ultra Boy, and this is Ultraman's way of quote-unquote parenting to toughen up his son and probably to make him much more a convincing super son, one who was also tortured by Ultraman, and so he could then send him off into Earth 3 or whatever the hell happened there. There's still that other piece that we are missing in this story. Tomorrow Man tries to calm him down, reminding him nothing can hurt him since he's Superboy. They hear sirens in the distance and Tomorrow Man tells John that they need to do what they were born to do. They save people. The Newsboy Legion reporter Data Scream overhears the conversation, streaming it to the viewers and asking them what they think about what happened to the Super Son. Lois meanwhile heads to the Daily Planet Smallville office, finding it empty with only John's press badge on the desk and a hell of a lot of dust covering everything, hinting that maybe the office actually hasn't been used in a long time. Lois soon realizes that while she thought this would provide some inspiration and a path for John, clearly journalism wasn't his path. She thinks that her son wanted a do-over of life, wondering if she caught him, would he even pick up, or even if he could she do that because of how time travel works or what the rules are? Now, I was really looking forward to John trying out working for the Daily Planet. It felt like a good fit. You know, he's tried being his father and tried to be Superman, so why not try being Lois Lane for a little bit? It was something new. I get what Slott is doing here, having John branch out into his own track. You know, what I said before, how he's fulfilling a mentor role and he's finding himself is actually pretty good at that. So I understand what he's doing here with this, you know, arc, but it's something I really hope that he comes back to at some point as well, and maybe gives it another go, because that issue where John actually started investigating stuff and, you know, found out about the mole people was really damn good. It was really interesting seeing him in that role and how he approached it with both superpowers and the lessons that he learned from his mother. Lois ponders about which John her son would rather be, wishing Clark was there to help her. Back in Metropolis, Tomorrow Man and Superboy bust into the lab of Dabney Donovan, whose army of clones are in the process of ripping out Metallo's Kryptonite heart, with the villain screaming at the top of his lungs for someone to help, something the heroes heard. Superboy doesn't really want to save a villain like Metallo, but Tomorrow Man reminds him that they save everybody, since that's what heroes do. The heroes take down the clones as Metallo's Kryptonite heart is extracted by Dabney, who plans on using it in his experiments. Tomorrow Man socks him in the face though, and the heart falls from his hands. but luckily the inertron in Tomorrow Man's suit shields him from the radiation. The heart bounces across the floor and Superboy catches it, much to the shock of Tomorrow Man, since as a Kryptonian, Superboy should be deathly susceptible to the radiation. John seems to catch himself, remembering it's kryptonite, and he's weak to it as he drops the heart. Now this is the big number 2 bit of proof that this is not John Kent. He's not weak to kryptonite. In fact, it doesn't seem to hurt him. If anything, it seems to make him stronger, like it does with the Earth 3 Kryptonians. The slow reveals are great since it's all John's own doing. He's like slipping up in these little moments like this because he's getting too angry or careless, or he doesn't realize how much different this world is to Earth 3. So like before, like where he thought Lois Lane still had powers and all that sort of stuff. He's forgetting which world he's on, and he's just a kid as well. He can't be expected to remember all of this stuff. So he's going to have little slip ups here and there. And I like that Slott is peppering them out throughout the issue. As Tomorrow Man's suspicions grow, Lois pays a visit to Steelworks, thanking John Henry Irons for looking after Beppo. John reveals that the source of the chimp's powers are from the Calderon green kryptonite Dabney Donovan was using. Lois confirms Donovan and his clones did indeed do a procedure on Beppo, but luckily the Red Sun enclosure the chimp currently resides in means he's perfectly normal and safe. Lois isn't actually there to see Beppo though, as Steel has completed a second Red Sun enclosure for Lois, hoping that she is right about the younger John not being her actual son. Steel wonders if this young John isn't her son. Is the older John still around, since he's been helping them with the kryptonite trials, but he's not been around for a while, so much so that Lana has been filling in for him with her Superwoman form. Steel shows Lois that they are trying to unlock the hidden properties of the Calderon kryptonite, and the Donovan clones might have actually given them the opening they need with a sample of it. Finally, we are getting some plot involving the green kryptonite from Calderon, since if you remember, this isn't just any old normal green kryptonite. This came to Earth in a giant meteor covered in inertron, which is the same material that Tomorrow Man's suit is made out of, and it also seemingly came from the future or sometime in the near future. So it's got some extra properties to it, some of which we've already seen, as it's seemingly able to give people Kryptonian powers. Now I do think this is actually going to factor into the upcoming Kingdom of Zod storyline, since we've seen from solicits and covers that Zod does end up fighting some of the Kryptonites of Calderon, and some of the Kryptonite is actually on the like pages and stuff that we've seen. So I imagine it's going to factor in very heavily in that storyline, and we're going to learn like what the secret of this particular Kryptonite is. I'm just glad that there's more focus being put back on this kryptonite, since it was a big thing and then we kind of diverted there for a couple of issues for some other stuff, and now we're coming back to it. John Henry begins a new test with the Calderon kryptonite, figuring if the kryptonite can give primates powers, what else can it do? The experiment goes awry, breaking containment and shooting right into the nearby kryptonite stockpile, which causes it to replicate and grow at an astounding rate. One of the scientists, Dr. Jensen, tries to study the mineral up close, but Steel warns him to get clear. However, it's too late, as the kryptonite jumps at Jensen, piercing his body and growing all over him as it kills him slowly. Steel evacs the other scientists as Superwoman protects Lois from the encroaching kryptonite, causing it to also jump onto her body and infect her, turning her red costume green, while also growing kryptonite stalactites out of her shoulders. Now this is a very interesting development. The kryptonite seems to have a mind of its own now and infects not just other pieces of kryptonite, but also powered people. I wonder if this has anything to do with the sunstone crystal President Castillo got his hands on a couple of issues ago, and it unlocked something in the Calderon kryptonite, since now it seems to absorb, the more earthbound green kryptonite which Steel had on hand here. Maybe Calderon has unlocked some sort of control over it, and infecting people like Superwoman and Beppo is them trying to control the heroes in some regard. It's a cool development for the kryptonite storyline, since it makes it so much more than just, it's a green rock that makes the Kryptonians sick. It's something a little bit more dangerous now than it was before. High above the lab, Superboy and Tomorrow Man hear the alarms and green and red flashing lights, and Tomorrow Man knows those lights mean something is wrong with the kryptonite trials, heading down to Steelworks and assuring John that Beppo is okay, but they cannot play favorites when they are in trouble. They have to save everyone since they are heroes, and those are the rules they need to follow. One of the mole men that Tomorrow Man met a few issues ago warns him not to go into the lab since there's too much kryptonite, but Superboy knows that he can take it. As surveillance cameras watch on, the heroes rip into the lab and Tomorrow Man uses his cape to cover his head, telling John that while the inertron in his suit protects him, the top of his head is actually exposed. So wrapping the cape around his head gives him a little bit of extra protection. And this is actually something I thought about earlier when John mentioned the suit giving him protection, since he's like the top of his forehead and his hair is sticking out, so that wouldn't be protected. And I like that Slott thought about that and gave him this little bit of a line here. It also kind of changes his outfit a little bit and it makes it look even cooler than it was before. I love the whole like hood with the mask over the full face mask. It looks really cool. A little bit more menacing than what I assure he was probably going for, but I really dig it. Superboy, on the other hand, isn't fazed by the Kryptonite at all as they meet with Steel, finding the Kryptonite growing faster and people on the lower levels are trapped. John knows that Beppo is on the lower levels, speeding down into the Red Sun lab to free his monkey friend. Upon reaching the lab though, John sees the containment enclosure next to Beppo's, and Steel tells him that it will keep him safe, thinking that he should get into it with Beppo until they solve the Kryptonite mess, so he isn't exposed to the radiation. Tomorrow Man, who didn't know about the enclosure Lois had Steel build, thinks that they should talk about it. But the damage has already been done and John becomes very angry, knowing that this is just a cage and it's a nicer looking volcano prison. Steel, knowing that this Superboy is not indeed the Superboy he knew, tries to hit him with a hammer, promising to apologize to him later since they need to save the world now and they'll deal with him another time. John, however, stops the hammer, taking it from the hero as he comes for Tomorrow Man, who realizes that whomever this John is, it's not some past version of himself, it's someone else. Across the country in the Batcave, Robin observes the security camera footage from Steelworks, knowing that from the get-go this supposed Superboy isn't actually Superboy and the footage he's collected supports his hunch. Batman arrives and Robin can tell by his father's expression that he's already solved the riddle of the Superboy. Bruce knows that Damian would have solved it if he had the information he had, pulling up sealed case files on an adventure that he and Superman had years ago to Earth 3. Batman reveals that during that adventure, they discovered that the Earth 3 Superwoman, who was Lois Lane, was pregnant with Ultraman's child, which to Robin is concrete proof that this indeed is not John Kent, it's an ULTRABOY. Slott using a very little tidbit from Mark Waid's recent World's Finest run, which at the time I said was absolutely going to tie back into the story. It was definitely set up for this story. It's so cool. It feels so rewarding to actually have read that. It was just like a very little hand wavy moment that you could easily have it was just like flavor for the issue. And I love that Slott is doing something bigger with it here. And it makes it even more obvious that right from the start, this was never actually going to be the younger John that everyone seems to want back. Ignoring the fact that this entire premise was all born from the fact that a demon gave John what he wanted. A demon, you don't make deals with demons, or if you do, the wish or the deal will end badly for those who make it. It's a thing as old as time, and we see it all the time. And it's also, as I said before, this is very much proof that they're not bringing the younger John back fully. They've moved past that. Older John is here to stay in a newer role. And it's time certain fans also move on as well. They could bring him back in, 10 or so years whenever the universe does another hard reset, but right now that's not happening at all. Superman Unlimited issue 14 was a roller coaster of reveals, all leading to that final page that confirms everything I've been theorizing over the last couple of issues regarding the return of the Super Son. I love the build up that Slott did with it, along with tying it into a little something that Mark Waid had a hand in creating a couple of issues ago in his World's Finest run. The direction they're also taking Tomorrow Man and Lois is really interesting as well. I like Slott's voice for Lois. I think it's a good character arc for her to sort of investigate who or what her son is now, since she very clearly knows it's not the son she thought it was. And I like John being a bit more of a mentor figure to his younger self, or the younger ULTRABOY, and trying to become a mentor to younger heroes. It's a role I feel he is suited for, since none of the other Superman family members are actually doing that role at the moment. Connor's off doing his own thing, Supergirl is off doing her own thing, so they need that sort of mentor to shepherd in some of the younger heroes. It's a very Superman role. He's fulfilling his duty sees as Superman in his own way. It's given him his own path, and I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to seeing how Slott is going to deploy the twist fully in the next issue. I'm intrigued to see where it's going to go and where it falls in with Kingdom of Zod and all this other stuff, since it seems like we're building towards an Earth 3 confrontation, but having that then going into Kingdom of Zod or vice versa seems a little bit too much to balance, but I'm intrigued to see what Slott is going to do with it. I'm going to give this issue an 8.5 out of 10.